you?
Good. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning. So to start, I love that the first couple episodes of this season, we really get to see Brian just like he has one little line, one little scene, and then he's like, I'm gonna be mad about this because my friend's ignoring me until he gets like essentially forces himself back in Jimmy's life. And I just think that's very fun for this character that he continually is like, I'm gonna give you some time and then I'm gonna force my way back into your life because you're annoying me with a character like that where it is so at this point now it's a little bit of a pattern, but it is so like those friends, like you know exactly who those friends are. How much fun is it for you to like track that part of Brian's journey with Jimmy where he's in the in that space of I'm gonna give you whatever time you need before I make you be my friend again.
Yeah, it's a running pattern with them that he's like, all right, go ahead, go and you can go and take your toys and go home but eventually we're gonna come back to this. Um, it's it's great. He's such a great, as all the characters are on Shrinking. There's such great psychological enigmas, like regular human beings. They've got the way they all think they're one way and throughout the course of the series realize that they're different than that and very different from each other. um so I'm actually even though it I always feel like the things that happen on this show seem impossible but are inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Like that Jimmy and Brian's estrangement will lead to a resolution, and then their re-estrangement will lead to a slap in the face. Feels both impossible and inevitable. And similarly, the way that Brian ends up being the conduit that brings Lewis, the drunk driver,
Mm-hmm.
who is the catalyst for the entire series, into the fold of this friend group. I mean, not necessarily like a part of the group, but like is the one who sort of begins the process of forgiveness for this guy. Feels at once impossible and yet inevitable because of all the people in this group, Brian being the one that ends up being the empathetic and the olive branch is I think is not on anyone's bingo card. But then when it happens, when it is him and when he is the one that makes it happen, it just you sort of realize, oh, yeah, right. He is the kind of guy that could do this, and whether he knew it or not, whether any of them knew it or not, that's where we are, and it works. This show is like so good at every time I get a scene, every time I sit down, and okay, there's a two-person scene. Which one of us is the shrink, and which one of us is the patient? And sometimes sometimes Brian's the patient, sometimes Brian's the shrink, and it works that way. I think for every character, which is quite beautiful.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, I was like, my favorite part, I think, is like so far in this season, every time someone has met Lewis, especially when it's been Jimmy, it's just like, no, like I hate you, like get out of here, like why are you here, like, or like when the daughter goes and she's sitting there and she's like, I just wanted to see you to like see if you recognize that you ruined my life, and it's all like doggy on him, and then Brian was the first one that said, well, how are you doing?
Right.
When he sees him, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess he is like very compassionate and human because I was on their side like, yeah, no, who's that guy, who cares? But Brian's like, no, this poor guy also probably is like not doing great. And how does stuff like that really show you like the heart and the core of a character, like when you look at it in the grand scheme of a show like this and see how other characters react versus how Brian would react?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it shows me that we contain multitudes because they set Brian up to be. They call him a narcissist. They tell him he's self-centered. We watch him, like freak out over things that other people, say aren't big problem. He's like freaking out about being a dad, about maybe having a baby, and Liz and Gabby are like, well, that's not a real problem. You don't have a real problem, and so he's always sort of chasing this like I've got problems too, having previously been the guy who doesn't have any problems. So you don't really assume that someone like him is going to be useful at all when it comes to helping anybody. And yet, and then on the other hand, we see characters like Gabby or Paul who are so good at helping people, but then when they need help themselves, they have to ask, just
Mhm.
like everybody else. And Uh, that's to me the secret sauce of this show is how deep and layered and complicated every one of these characters are, and just when you think you know one of them, um, they surprise you. And yeah, I'm surprised when I read the scripts. You know, I didn't know Brian was going to end up being the one to ask. I didn't know Brian was going to be the one to ask Lewis how he was, and I certainly didn't know Alice was going to be the one to forgive him first.
Mm-hmm.
And these writers, they find a way. They're just incredible, and they find a way to make you expect one thing, um and then they give you a different thing, and it is shocking sometimes. It's extremely moving, often hilarious, and yeah, I feel sometimes I read the scripts and I think, oh, I wish I could just watch this show. I'm glad I'm on it. I like the job, but I think it's one of those shows that I think I would be a fan of, and I would look forward to every week, and I do.
Yeah, it's such I could go on and on because like I do love that Alice is the first to forgive him, but also it's like, yeah, but she's doing the same thing that like Heidi Gardner's character was doing because she's blaming herself because she messed up. And I was like, this show has so many layers that I'm like, they all connect to each other. But what I love about Brian is he is such not a stereotype in any way, but then he does the most stereotypical things like, oh, my husband wants a dog or wants a baby, so let me try the dog first, which is like such a like weird stereotype that exists in our society of like, you want a baby, try a dog first.
Yeah.
And so I love that that's what his solution was. He's like, great, I'm gonna go get a bunch of dogs. We're gonna try these out first and see how it goes. With with stuff like that, that is meant to play as laughs, but when you like go into the psychology of it, is like a guy who's trying to come to terms with what his partner wants. How much fun is it for you to get to play the comedy aspect of that and let like the audience unpack all of those other things that Brian's kind of going through in that moment?
It's delightful to get to play things that play things for real that are hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'll give you a great example. A lot of the story, I think it's okay that I say this. A lot of the story of Brian and Charlie having a baby mirrors Randall Winston, our executive producer and one of our directors. The experience he had first becoming a father with his husband. Not everything, but there's like little things, and sometimes this is what's so great about this show. Sometimes the most absurd things are real. Like for example, when Brian shows up at Gabby's freaking out because they might be getting a baby tomorrow, and he's like, I haven't even read a baby book yet. And he shows up and he's like, I didn't know what to get, so I got this chicken onesie. And that is real. That really happened to Randall. He really went to like Babies R Us and got 1,000 diapers and a chicken onesie, and that was it. And that's the kind of thing that you read and you're like, this is absurd. No normal human would ever do this. But I happen to know that a very intelligent, successful, powerful man did exactly that. And I think that so that's really that's to me what keeps the show both heightened and grounded. Like the comedy can be just off the wall, but it's always grounded in something, and sometimes it's literally grounded in the truth, like a moment like that, which feels um, absurd, feels like it doesn't exist in the real world, but it absolutely does because we are crazy. Human beings are crazy, and we do crazy things sometimes. And this show embraces those things as human and real um, and fallible. You know, we are all imperfect,
Mm-hmm.
working our these characters are aware of their imperfectness and doing what they can to help each other be better and love each other. I mean, it's like it's sort of like almost like aggressive love. This show.
Yeah. I do have to talk about my favorite scene so far in this whole season has been when Brian and Jimmy are fighting with each other and they both don't know anything of the other one, but they're blaming the other one for not knowing anything. Because it is like, well, how old's Alice? And Brian's like, what's age? And it's like, well, she just got her license, so it's very easy to like figure out, but he is just like so not paying attention that he's like, I don't, she's 13, it's fine. But like when you have those fight scenes, which and I know in shows like this, everything is scripted, but it's also a comedy. So the question's always like, well, did you guys get to like riff on those fight sequences? fight sequences, the verbal fight? And if so, like how much fun is that for you as an actor to like think of a character's way of responding to someone they've been friends with for however many years in a moment like that where their tensions are so high?
Well, the great part about getting to have a fight scene or any scene really, but especially like a fight scene where you want to say the thing, say the best thing, is that I I don't have to do it in the spur of the moment the way that a real fight is. It doesn't happen, like in the moment where you finish the fight and you think, oh, I wish I'd said this, because I have the script, and then we do several takes. So there's lots of opportunities. But better than that, I'm in the scene opposite genius Jason Segel, and there's writers on set. So like it's kind of the perfect. I'm a lucky person that I get not just my own brain and my own time, but everyone else's brain and time too. But I will say the way that the show is so well written. I know I keep saying this, but the writers are so good. I very rarely would deign to improve upon what they have written. Occasionally, I'll have like an alternate line that's in my head, and I think, oh, I could say this. Or when the take is over, or when the scene is at the end, I might have something extra to say to throw in. But very rarely do I think I can do. I mean, never. I don't think I've ever thought I can do better than this, because I'm not a writer. They are incredible writers, and in some ways, they get me and the character better than I do, and I'm just the vessel. I'm just sort of the conduit. Um, but a lot of the like, if you look at the script that we had on the day, and then you look at the show, if it's different, a lot of that is a collaboration on the day when we're shooting it. We're like, okay, this time try this time try this, or we're gonna do this version, and then when we move the camera, we're like, okay, remember that version, got to go back to that version, and then we give them options, and when they cut it together, they decide. And sometimes like we'll try something on one take. We'll do a big scene with a lot of people and the camera's moving around, and we do the whole scene 30 times. And I try something weird and different one time, and that ends up in the show. And that's maybe because it was the best idea. It's maybe because we got tired of everything else. Um, who knows why? I mean, that's sort of the collaboration of doing something for the camera, where there's the writing process, the shooting process, and the editing process. It's like really different. It's three different shows, um, and they all come together magically. And uh, I've not been in on the writing or editing process of this show, so I don't really know how that part of the sausage gets made. But I do know that, like, Bill Lawrence, our creator, is part of every piece, and and the writer and the director of the episode go along with it, and then there are other writers that help, and then of course everybody who helps shoot it, and then the editing team that helps put it together. It's real, it takes a village. It's a lot of people that come together to create the best possible versions of these scenes. And so a lot of times what we're doing on set is just like giving options, like taking all the amazing stuff that they wrote and making sure we shoot that. But then also, if something happens in the moment that's like, oh, that's really funny, we should put that in there. And there's always a writer on set to say, oh yeah, let's get that, and let's make sure we get that. And sometimes there's even like writers that aren't on set, but they're watching the feed somehow through the magic technology. They're in their office watching it, or they're in another city watching it, and they'll text in ideas like, try this, try this. It's really fun. It's very cool.
I love it. For my last quick question, I do want to ask you the what I think is so fun about an ensemble show is it'll be like the first two episodes are Jimmy based, then it'll switch to Paul, then it'll switch to Brian, it'll just kind of switch to whoever is like the main character in that moment, or Gabby or whoever it is. When you have to go and fade back into Brian as the supporting character versus when Brian gets his leading moments, how much fun is that dynamic shift for you as an actor to kind of go back into like a supporting role versus when you get the leading moments in episodes?
It's really fun. I love being the guy with the problem. and then I love being the guy who is either causing the problem or is helping solve the problem. And again, like I said, it's always like, am I the patient or the doctor in this scene or this episode? But I will also say what's really cool about this show. Another thing that's really cool about this show is that there's not a lot of excuse me, not a lot of exposition.
Mhm.
So we don't, you'll check into a story in the middle of a story, and they expect you to catch up, which I think is really smart. A lot of times you watch certain TV shows, and hello,
Sorry, I met my mom's for the holidays. Hi, Mom. Okay, goodbye, goodbye.
happy holidays, mom.
Sorry.
That's adorable. Um, no, but you'll often have a lot of like explanation about what's going on in the storyline or what our relationship is or this or that. And this show really expects you to fill in gaps, which I think makes people more invested. I think when the audience, when the viewer has to um, do some of the work, when they have to add um, the, the 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 connective tissue, how did they get from this? How did a character get from this? Like, for example, there's a scene where my character finally sits down on Gabby's couch in season one, where he's got a problem. He doesn't like to admit that he has a problem. He doesn't want to ask for help. And then finally, he's just like comes in and he plops down on her couch and he says, "I've got this problem. Can we please talk?" And she's so excited. And you don't see that dynamic again for a whole year. And then it happens, I think, in episode seven. It happens again where he rushes to her with a problem. It's the scene with the chicken onesie. And you don't need to explain again that, oh, this is what he does. Because the audience either will remember or they'll just pick it up.
Yeah.
And even then, you didn't need an explanation. So anyway, that's just to say that, like, it's seamless the way that the show brings its characters to the forefront and then sends them back to the sort of background. And whether I'm one scene an episode, two scenes an episode, or like a big old arc in the episode, it's always really satisfying. And any combination of two characters or three characters on this show is sort of magical. There's an episode coming up later in the season where I have a whole story with um, Derek and Sean, two characters that we've seen Brian interact with them, and we know that they've interacted off screen, but they get a story together, and it was fun for all three of us to get to hang out together on set, but also get to explore what is Brian's relationship to Derek and Sean like.
Yeah, I cannot wait for everyone to get to see the rest of the season. Shrinking is still one of the best shows on TV. I love it so much. And thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel. It's really nice talking to you, and thanks for liking the show and wanting to spread the word. Really appreciate it.
Of course.